The patrol ship of the Silex Empire drifted slowly above the edge of a forgotten border world. Its hull glowed faintly under the light of a dying star. The crew moved with the calm rhythm of long watch duty. Some tapped quietly at their screens. Others leaned back, bored of the silence that stretched across empty space. Then a faint light appeared on the farthest edge of their sensors. At first it seemed like nothing, just a distant reflection. But the light grew brighter, steadier. And closer. Analyst Lyra leaned forward, her eyes fixed on the readings. She frowned, tapped the console twice, and called to the bridge officer. "Contact ahead. Speed is rising, but..." "It's strange." The captain raised his head, tired but curious. "Strange how?" he asked. Lyra turned the display so everyone could see. The object moved like a ship, but the numbers made no sense. Its size looked small, like a civilian vessel, but its speed climbed in jumps that no civilian reactor could manage. The captain straightened, suddenly alert. He ordered a full scan. Expecting maybe smugglers or a wandering trader trying to sneak past the border. The scan came back and the bridge fell silent. The reading showed only a soft glow, like a weak civilian engine. But no jump wake, no reactor flare, and yet the speed was still climbing. Lyra's voice was quiet but sharp. "This should not be possible," she said. Then a short code blinked across the screen. One word appeared in clear letters. "Human." The crew froze, some whispered in disbelief. Humans were not supposed to be here, not this deep, not on this border. To most of the Empire, humans were still little more than rumors, tales of colonists, traders, and old battles, but not a threat. Yet here was a ship, sending its name boldly into their data glass. The signal cut as suddenly as it appeared. The object vanished from sensors, not in a flash of light. Not with the burst of energy that came from a normal jump. It simply slipped away. Like a star hidden behind a drifting cloud. The captain's throat went dry. He called the fleet commander. At once, Lord Commander Vesk answered from the Grand Flagship. His image filled the screen, eyes hard, voice cold. The captain explained. And Vesk gave a single order. Trap it. Within minutes, warships of the Empire dropped from fold space and took their places around the border world. Their hulls shone with sharp lines of steel, engines hummed with power. They moved like blades forming a cage. The net closed slowly, patiently. The Silex were masters of control. The unknown ship would have no way out. Then the object returned. Much closer than before, it glided into sight as if distance had folded inward to welcome it. Its hull was dark, sharp, and unfamiliar. It looked small for a warship, almost fragile, yet it carried the presence of something dangerous. Across its side, bright letters burned into alien eyes. UNSV Aegis. On Aegis, Captain Mira Reyes stood. At the command rail, her face calm, eyes steady. Behind her, the ship's AI, Kestrel, whispered in a tone that was neither male nor female. "Fold sail stable, veil ready, whispered drones armed." Chief Engineer Arun Patel checked his panels. His hands were quick, but steady. He knew the ship, he trusted it, and he trusted her. The alien fleet opened a channel. Lord Commander Vesk's voice rolled across the bridge. Harsh and demanding. "Human vessel, cut engines and prepare to be boarded." His tone was iron. His pride demanded obedience. On the Aegis bridge, silence followed. Captain Reyes did not answer right away. She watched the enemy lines with quiet eyes. She saw their tight ranks, their weapons glowing with power. She saw their fear, though they tried to hide it behind pride. Aegis moved forward, not by thrust alone, but by bending the very fabric of space. The ship glided as if distance itself had become soft. Pulled and folded around its dark hull. To the Silex, it looked like sorcery. To Lyra, it looked like broken numbers. "They catch space," she whispered. "They ride it like wind." Vesk ordered a warning shot. A siege gun lit the void with a beam of white fire. It cut an asteroid in half with casual strength. Chunks of rock spun away, burning as they tumbled. But Aegis did not fire back the same way. Instead, It drew a thin, bright line into the dark. The line curved, bent, and then gripped the broken asteroid fragments. The pieces slowed, then froze in place, hanging like glass suspended in air. On the alien bridge, voices rose, fear running like a chill through the crew. No ship was supposed to do this. No technology they knew could twist space like a hand closing around water. Lord Commander Vesk gritted his teeth, but his eyes flickered. With doubt, Analyst Lyra leaned closer, whispering almost to herself, "It is not a trick, this is real." Back on Aegis, Captain Reyes finally spoke. Her voice carried across the void, calm, steady, and without fear. "We do not seek a fight," she said, "but we will not be taken." The words were simple, but every syllable pressed into the ears of the Scilex like weight. The Empire fleet tightened its net. Shields flared alive, guns charged, missiles lined up in cold launch tubes. The storm of war was seconds away. On Aegis, Kestrel counted targets, its voice smooth. 37 active weapons, 3 superguns. Probability of strike 82%. Arun Patel exhaled slowly, his hands moved with precision. He fed power in controlled pulses. The veil shield shimmered, ready to spread and absorb. Captain Reyes raised one hand. "Whispers," she ordered. 3 small drones slipped out of Aegis and drifted into the dark. They glowed faintly, copying the ship's signal, copying its heat. To enemy sensors, each one became Aegis itself. The Scilex crews shouted in panic. They saw 3 targets where one had been. Their gunners fired wildly. Splits of light filled space. 2 false Aegis burned. The real one slid unharmed between bursts. On the Empire flagship, Lyra's eyes widened at the data. No reactor surge, no jump flash, and still they move faster than light. Vesk slammed a hand against the arm of his chair. "Fire the flagship gun. End this." The crew obeyed. And a giant beam cut across space. A road of white fire meant to split the human ship in 2. Light swallowed the Aegis for a moment. The void burned with brilliance. When it faded, the ship still stood, hull glowing but unbroken, shields alive. The veil had spread the hit across its skin like rain across a calm lake. On Aegis, Kestrel's voice was soft and certain. "Veil holding, full sail stable, next move ready." Captain Reyes did not flinch. She watched the enemy fleet through calm eyes. She lowered her hand and gave her next command. The real battle was only beginning. The order to trap the strange contact spread across the Scilex fleet like a cold wind, and officers snapped to their stations with the quiet speed of long habit. The flagship's war council lit up with pale screens and hard faces. Lord Commander Vesk stood tall in the center ring and watched the feeds with a stare that dared them to blink. Analyst Lyra spoke in a steady voice that hid her unease. She showed the raw data again. The soft engine glow that should belong to a small trader. The missing jump wake that should be impossible for any ship that moved this fast. The strange rhythm of speed that rose in steps like a heartbeat. Vesk's jaw was rigid as stone. He told the council that the humans were playing a trick, that they wanted the Empire to waste time and reveal its strength. He said that pride must not be touched by rumor, and that fear was a weapon the Empire did not carry. Yet the numbers on Lyra's screen did not care about pride. She pointed to the curve of the unknown ship's path. How it slipped forward without the heat spike of a reactor push. How it arrived close without the flash of a jump. How the distance around it looked thin on their scopes. Vesk paced once around the ring and then cut the debate with a single order. They would take the ship alive, board it, seize its engines and its memory banks, and show the border worlds that no rumor could shake the Scilex line. Boarding pods armed with null fields rolled into launch cradles. Marines checked their suits and their cutting torches. Officers marked the human hull as a target that must not be broken. The fleet tightened its net and left only one narrow path open. A fake path that led straight into overlapping tractor beams and layered mines that could stun a cruiser without tearing it apart. The trap was precise, cold, and clean. The unknown ship returned as if the dark itself stepped aside for it. And the name UNSV Aegis flared like a quiet challenge across alien glass. The Silex line shifted, warships aligning their shields to force Aegis into the fake path. Sensors tracked the human hull, then blinked, then tracked it again from anew. Point a few ship lengths away, Lyra felt her mouth go dry. It was not teleport and not thrust. It was something that made distance behave like cloth in a careful hand. She heard herself say, almost without breath, "They are not pushing through space, they are folding it toward them." Vesk gave the order, and the boarding pods launched in a silver swarm. They flew hard and fast, wrapped in null fields that ate radar and dulled light. They aimed for engine bells, hangar doors, and sensor towers. Aegis turned its nose a fraction, and the line of space in front of it curled like a ribbon in wind. The human ships slid along that curve, and the pods missed by a clean margin. Not by their own error, but because the path they chased had moved. The pods corrected, they dove again. And again the target was not where space said it should be. On the flagship, murmurs grew. Vesk's stare cut them. But doubt grew anyway. Lyra expanded a frame and caught tiny flashes beside the human hull. Aegis was shedding drones, small and quiet and clever. Each drone copied heat and signal, and even the faint noise of the fold. Now there were 3 Aegis on screen, all with the same signature curve. The pods split, confusion spread, and the fine rhythm of Silex precision broke into a rough pattern. Of too many choices, the human ship spoke at last, and the voice came calm and level. "We do not seek war, but we will not be taken." Vesk answered with iron words about law and trespass and strength. But some of his bridge crew were listening to their own fear instead. Aegis moved again, graceful and strange, and slid past the edge of the net with a glide that made distance look soft. Boarding pods stabbed at empty coordinates, tractor beams caught nothing but cold light, and mines flared harmlessly in the dark. In the silence that followed, only the hum of Empire engines filled the flagship, and Lord Commander Vesk felt, for the first time in many years, the thin edge of a thought. He would not say aloud, if this was a human ship, then the map his empire trusted had just learned a new shape. While the War Council tried to frame new orders and the boarding pods turned for another pass, the first true exchange of fire began far from any plan the Empire had drawn. Aegis reappeared behind the outer screen of escorts with a shift so gentle that some sensors called it a glitch. Captain Mira Reyes watched the numbers flow across her glass and spoke with the patience of a pilot who knows both her craft and her enemy. She ordered precise shots at engines and weapon nodes only. She did not want corpses or flames. She wanted the fight to stop before it spilled into tragedy. Chief Engineer Arun Patel pulsed power along the hull in measured steps, and the veil shield spread ready like a wide calm lake. The ship AI Kestrel counted threats in a soft voice and marked them with clean halos on the captain's view. The first human volleys were threads of pale light that touched escort engines and then fell away. And with each touch a ship's drive coughed, sparked, and went quiet. Not a single life support grid flickered. Not a single bridge window shattered. The escort line staggered in confusion as 3 of their own ships drifted into safe mode with their crews alive and bewildered. The Silex gunners roared and answered with a storm of fire. But the Whisper drones had done their quiet work too well. 3 targets moved where one should be, and the fire split, lost focus, and washed over empty space. Aegis kept moving with that same strange grace, sliding between blasts that would have torn a normal cruiser to pieces. The veil took what could not be avoided and spread the burn across the field until it felt like hard rain on steel instead of a spear to the heart. Reyes opened a wideband channel and spoke again. Her words were simple, and they carried weight because she had chosen mercy while under the guns. "Stand down and live. We will not shoot to kill. End this now." On the flagship, Vesk's pride rose like a wall against that offer. He could not accept the idea that a smaller force could show mercy and still hold the advantage. He ordered a pincer and a crush. He told 2 heavy cruisers to swing wide and light their side beams. He armed a cage of tractor hooks that could lock a ship in place, and he authorized a screen of micromines that could turn any fold trick into a wound. If the human misstepped, Lyra warned that the patterns they knew might not apply, that the fold sail moved along curves the Empire had never flown. But the orders were already moving at battle speed. The heavy cruisers thrust in and tried to close the jaws. Tractor hooks reached. Micromines glittered like dust in sunlight. Aegis felt the pull and the bite. The hull sang under stress. Kestrel marked shear lines and spoke a calm countdown that kept the crew steady. Arun shifted the veil to a long oval to spread the strain and opened clean channels for heat to run. Reyes watched for the moment that all the parts of the trap were tightest, not to be caught but to let them pull against each other. Then she told the fold sail to catch a different part of the fabric, 1 degree off, 1 breath sooner than any model would expect, and the ship slid out of the closing teeth like a fish passing through hands that close a heartbeat too late. The tractor hooks caught only shadow, the micromines flashed on empty wake, and the cruisers almost collided in their own momentum. Aegis appeared again off the flagship's port quarter, quiet and steady and whole, and the message was not spoken. Now, it was written in the steady way the human ship refused to kill while it could. Vesk tasted the bitter mix of fear and rage. He reached for a last card, a weapon the Empire rarely used because it bent space in a way that made even Silex crews feel sick. Deep in the flagship's heart, the anchor spear woke, a gravity lance. Designed to pin distortions and nail fold fields to one spot, Lyra saw the arming sequence and felt cold. She knew that if it locked true, the Aegis might be held in place long enough for every gun in the fleet to draw a straight line to its heart. The lance charged, the screens trembled. A low sound rolled through the hull like thunder underwater. Space around Aegis tightened like a fist, and Kestrel's voice, still calm, cut through the rising noise. Fold sail under shear, vector. Stress exceeding safe range. Brace for field spike. The crew gripped rails, the veil burned brighter. And Captain Reyes leaned into the harness with clear eyes as the human ship fought a pull that wanted to turn its new kind of movement into a trap. And in that breath, between one heartbeat and the next, the Silex thought they had finally found the weight that could hold a human miracle down. Asterisk space around the Aegis tightened like a knot as the anchor spear from the Silex flagship sank invisible hooks into the fold field and tried to pin the human ship in one place. The hull sang with a deep metal tone that the crew felt in their bones. Cages trembled, and warning lights bloomed along the edges of the command screens like small red suns. Kestrel spoke in a calm voice that never rose, giving numbers that would scare any other crew. Field shear rising, vector drift narrowing, failure margin shrinking by the heartbeat. But Captain Mira Reyes kept her eyes level and her breath even. She knew panic was a kind of gravity too. And if she let it grip the bridge, then the ship would fall into fear before it fell into the enemy's trap. She asked for options in simple words, and Chief Engineer Arun Patel answered with simple words back. He could open the veil shield like a long sail and let the gravity lance pull on it instead of the hull. He could cut power in short pulses to make the ship look like it was stuttering. And he could throw the whisper drones into the teeth of the anchor spear to make the lock hunt for the wrong echo. It would hurt, it would risk heat and stress, but it would give them a narrow door to slip through. Reyes nodded once, a small move with big meaning, and the crew followed that little nod like a lighthouse in rain. The veil stretched and thinned until it looked like a shining sheet wrapped around the Aegis. The pulses began, the drones leapt, and at once the numbers on every Silex display started to wobble. The anchor spear felt the fold it had hooked begin to flex and flex again, like a fish twisting inside a net. The flagship's gunners tried to steady the lock. They fed more power into the lance. They narrowed the beam until it was sharp as a needle, but the needle slipped on a mirror that kept changing angle. On the enemy bridge, Lord Commander Vesk barked orders with iron pride. Yet in the corner of his eye he saw his crew sway at the stomach-sick feel of bent gravity, and he knew this weapon had costs. He told them to ignore the pain and hold the human ship fast. He promised them honor if they broke the miracle analyst. Lyra did not look away from her console. She watched the drones throw ghost echoes into the lock. She watched the veil widen to share the strain. And she whispered to herself that none of their models had ever shown a ship taking the blow like this, and not snapping. She understood that the Aegis was not fighting power with more power. It was fighting shape with shape, laying a soft hand. On the same fabric, the anchor spear tried to crush. The deck thrummed like a great drum, and then Kestrel counted down in a voice as even as rain. 3, 2, 1. And on 1, the Aegis rolled a hair's breadth about its long axis while Arun flipped the shield phase and cut the pulses in a new rhythm. The change was tiny to the eye, but it turned the pull of the lance against itself. Like a strong grip yanked sideways, the anchor spear slid off the drone Echo and bit hard into an empty fold scar where a microjump had once been. The lock faltered. The pressure fell, and the human ship breathed, not with air but with motion, folding a finger width of space and easing a handspan forward. Vesk shouted for a correction, and the flagship obeyed, but the second lock found only the trail of heat the drones left. While the real ship glided out of the worst of the spear's reach, Reyes did not chase a kill, she chased clarity. She told Kestrel to map the spear's charge cycle, and told Arun to time the veil to meet the next spike at an angle that would spread it thin. The Silex heavy cruisers swung back for another crush. Tractor hooks opened like metal jaws, and a sheet of micromines bloomed in a glittering curtain meant to punish any fold sail trick. The Aegis answered with geometry, not rage. It slid along a curve that looked wrong to every Silex eye, and for a moment, the human ship seemed to skate on the edge of its own shadow. Tractor beams grabbed at where the ship had been a half-breath before, and the micromines burned their fuel into nothing as they chased a wake that curled away from them like mist. The first return volley from the Aegis was a soft strike to the spear assembly itself. Thin beams like sewing needles that stitched heat through the outer armor to the coupling rings deep inside. Nothing exploded, nothing grand flashed instead. There was a sound like a chain slipping from a gear, and the anchor spear's focus lost its perfect knife edge. Lyra felt it in her teeth and knew it in the numbers. She told Vesk in a steady voice that the human ship had not only escaped the lock, it had taught itself the spear's breathing and now timed its shield to that breath. Vesk's pride battled his fear and refused to step back. He ordered his gunners to fire the beam weapon again in a full burn, to cut and burn and push the Aegis into a corner where the cruisers could claw its engines free. The beam came like a white road again, and again the veil took it not at a single point, but as a broad ripple that ran across the shield like wind running across a lake. The hull glowed, plates groaned, and heat warnings climbed in hard red steps. Yet the ship held and moved and held again. Reyes kept her voice low and calm and told her crew they were doing well, they were doing enough. They were proof that control beats fury. She opened the channel once more to the enemy and spoke so every ship could hear. She said they did not want to damage the flagship. They did not want anyone to die, but they would not be taken. And they would answer every strike with a lesson. On every Silex screen, those words crawled under the firing. Solutions like a slow line of truth. The escort crews, alive but drifting after their engines had been neatly cut in the first exchange, heard it too and felt a new kind of fear, not for their lives but for their pride. Because mercy from a smaller force can feel like a mirror you do not want to face. Vesk clenched his hands and told himself that mercy was a mask for weakness. He ordered a final close pass, heavy cruisers on the flanks, the flagship forward, and the remaining escorts making a wall of guns. He would ram the human will with weight and heat and light until it cracked. Aegis moved to meet them, small against giants, dark against their bright hulls. And yet it felt like the center of the fight was wherever the human ship chose to stand. A rune warned that the veil needed a cool cycle soon, or the next hard hit would chew it thin. Kestrel offered a line he could fly that would reduce incoming fire by 13%. And Reyes took that line not because 13 was large, but because small, certain gains win long fights. The ships closed. The void between them became a tunnel of fire. And through that tunnel, the Aegis flowed like a swift river, cutting a canyon one patient inch at a time. Whisper drones flitted in and out, stealing target locks and handing the wrong solutions to angry guns. Thin beams from the human ship kissed cooling vents and power buses instead of crew compartments. Engines died cleanly, weapons went dark. Without screams, at last, when the flagship's great shadow loomed so near that hull plating filled the human bridge view, Reyes chose her sharpest, kindest blow. She told Kestrel to draw a line that touched the spear's heart for only a blink, and a rune bent that blink into a needle of heat and field interference. The needle slipped through armor, found the coupling. Rings again, and for one long breath, the anchor spear tried to bite and found its own teeth. The weapon tripped its safeties and shut down with a heavy sigh that every Silex officer felt as a loss in the chest. Silence followed in the flagship's core, not peaceful silence, but the stunned quiet that comes after a shout you thought would never end. Aegis pulled away one ship length, steady and unhurried, and the message was in the motion. We can kill, but we choose not to. We can run, but we choose to stand. On the flagship, Vesk stared at the dark spear housings and at the human silhouette beyond them and knew that force was no longer the only language on this field. He could press on and burn ships into drifting coffins, or he could listen to the shape of this new truth. He did not answer yet, pride and sense wrestling inside him like two old beasts. And as the crews on both sides waited for the next order, a ripple of news began to move across border channels and open bands, carrying a simple idea out to far worlds that a human warship had bent space, spared enemies, and walked out of a trap that should have been a Legend's End asterisk. The first beam faded from the human ship's hull like a storm sliding off a wide plain. And for a breath, the battlefield seemed to hold still in surprise as the veil shield shimmered and settled like calm water after a thrown stone. On the Aegis bridge, Kestrel gave smooth numbers in a gentle voice. Ripple amplitude reduced. Heat within safe range. Phase map ready. And Captain Mira Reyes listened without hurry, as if the ship were not inside a ring of angry guns, but standing in a quiet room where every choice could be measured. She asked a rune for the truth in simple words. Can it take another? And a rune, cheeks bright with sweat but hands steady, said it could if the timing stayed perfect and the power pulses stayed clean. He called the veil a big net spread across the ship. A net that did not block a blow but caught it and shared it over the whole field until no single spot had to break. Kestrel added that a narrow beam was like a knife, and the veil turned that knife into a wave that lost its edge. The idea sounded like a trick, but it was only good math and careful work. It was a shield that was not a wall but a set of moving ripples, like rings on water that meet a falling stone, meet it evenly, and carry the shock away. Captain Reyes told them to keep that rhythm no matter what came next. And her crew believed her calm more than they feared the next white road of light that the flagship was already drawing across the dark. On the Silex flagship, Lord Commander Vesk's command voice filled the bridge as he ordered a full burn from the main emitter, and crews obeyed, even as a faint ache in their skulls reminded them the last exchange had bent more than metal and field. Analyst Lyra was not watching pride or fear. She was watching patterns. Her screens showed the human shield was not one slow bubble like the Empire used, but a living fabric, changing with the strike it took. She ran a fast search through Empire archives and found a ghost of an idea from an old research branch the Empire had once shuttered. A field lattice that could spread force in motion rather than hold it in place. Her people had called it a veil long ago, and then called it useless because their engines could not keep the timing stable under war heat. The record showed proud red stamps across the pages. Theory closed, funds moved, Project Dead. Now she stared at the Aegis and saw the dead idea living on a human hull and moving like music. She told Vesk the truth, that they were fighting not a stronger wall but a better song, that the human shield turned straight lines into curves and turned a single hard hit into 1,000 soft ones. Vesk did not like the shape of that truth, but he liked losing even less. So he said they would drown the song in noise and throw so much light that the veil could not keep its rhythm. He called a staggered beam pattern from 3 heavy ships and told every escort to feed pulses at random intervals to muddy the water. Around the target, the tactic was brutal, simple, and often sure. Drown Grace under weight until it cannot breathe. The new storm arrived from every side. Thin lances, thick bolts, hard spikes, soft glows. A chaos made on purpose. And for a moment, the veil trembled and lost sync the way a drumline wobbles when too many players strike out of time. Arun cursed softly and changed the pulse map by hand, not trusting automation to guess fast enough. Kestrel shifted to shorter phrases and called beats like a conductor, left arc high, forward rim low, aft ring 5 degrees shallow, hold release, catch, and on the bridge, the crew felt the ship flow in their bones. Captain Reyes did not chase any shot of her own. She held fire and saved heat, because survival was the only message the Empire needed to hear right now. The first waves that slipped past the veil touched armor and made plates glow cherry red. Struts groaned like old trees in wind. A rail stanchion popped loose and skittered across a catwalk until a crewman caught it with a gloved hand. But the veil took the rest, not with magic, not with a miracle, but with 1,000 tiny choices made at the right time. The chaos tried to break the rhythm, and the rhythm bent, and then found a new shape and held. The Aegis rode the storm as a small boat rides white water, by facing every wave at an angle that lets it climb. Not by raw power but by smart balance. When the storm passed its worst, Reyes exhaled once. Not relief but a measured mark that they had crossed a hard place. She nodded to Arun and he flashed a tired grin that said the math still loved them. Kestrel reported the veil at 71% efficiency and rising, with a soft note of pride that only a careful ear would hear. Across the line the Empire watched the beam fade and expected the human ship to list or run or smoke. And when it did none of those things, a quiet disbelief spread like cold air under a door. Vesk felt it on his skin and fought it with the force of his will. He demanded new solutions, and his gunnery chief spoke about sustained beams and heat. Bloom and his tractor master spoke about long pull snares, and his admiral spoke about patience, because patience had always been a Silex virtue. Lyra spoke last and said the thing no one wanted to hear, that patience would not help if they kept using the same language. She said they were trying to crush water with a fist, and water would not obey. Vesk asked if she believed the human shield could be broken at all, and she said yes, but only by hitting the ship with a pattern that made its own math fall apart. A pattern that did not let ripples run clean. A pattern that had no rhythm at all. The problem with that plan was simple too. Their own crews could not aim guns with no rhythm for long without failing or vomiting into their suits. The human trick was not only strong, it was kind to its users. The Silex tools were strong and cruel to their own hands. That difference had cost them today. Vesk swallowed the anger that truth brought and told her to model a strike he could ask of mortals. She worked fast. She found a window when the veil would need a cool cycle. She found a knife line in the field where a narrow spear could bite deep, and she sent it upstairs without pride. Captain Reyes knew about windows because every honest captain does. She could feel the veil asking for rest the way a singer tastes dry air. She told Kestrel to find her a place where the enemy could not line every gun on them at once. And the AI showed her a low pocket behind the gutted engine bell of a drifting escort. It was not a hole to hide in. It was a place where geometry was friendly. She slid the Aegis there on a gentle fold, still in plain sight, still brave, smarter about angles, and she ordered a low burn cool cycle while the veil kept a soft ripple on the skin. She did not use the pause to gloat, she used it to teach. She opened a channel and spoke to the enemy crews who were not proud enough to close their ears. She told them why she had not aimed for their bridges. She told them that a weapon that cuts only what it must cut is a better weapon than one that kills without thought. She did not demand surrender. She invited sense. And on a dozen ships, men and women looked at their whole hands and the breath in their chests and felt an ache that was not fear but shame. The flagship did not soften. Pride does not bend in a minute. And the narrow spear pattern Lyra had found came hunting. It was clever and hard. A tight beam that tried to slip between veil ripples like a knife between ribs. Arun saw it coming and threw the shield into a fast ripple cascade that broke the neatness of its path. Kestrel leaned 1 degree into the fold and let the beam meet. Curved space instead of flat. It lost edge and spread like paint in water. The hull still glowed. Warning still sang. But the cut did not go in deep. The Aegis answered at last with a thin pair of threads that touched the flagship's beam couplings and made them hum off tune. Not broken, not ruined, but out of perfect shape, enough to buy breath for everyone. Reyes closed the channel with one line that would echo long after the fight. We do not want you to die, and we do not need you to. She turned the bow a fraction and let the fold sail catch a new seam in the fabric of space. And the ship moved the way a hawk moves when it finds the wind that is always there but not always known. And in that motion, even the proud felt awe, because they understood that they were not watching a bigger gun win a bigger fight. They were watching a better idea change the way a war could be fought. The flames of the last strike still glowed. Faint on the Aegis's hull when Captain Mira Reyes let her gaze wander across the quiet screens of her bridge. And though her crew worked with hands that carried sweat and strain, she knew they held steady because the ship itself had steadied them. It was time now not for another burst of fire, but for memory, because war is never only a clash of ships and weapons. It is the long chain of choices that bring a vessel to a moment where it stands alone against an empire. She remembered that chain even as the Silex regrouped for another strike, and her thoughts moved backward across the years to the docks of Earth where this ship had first been born in secret shadow and desperate hope. The shipyards that birthed Aegis were not the great floating factories of the old navies. They were smaller, hidden places scattered across the belt. Cold frames orbiting dead rocks where no empire eyes cared to look. Reyes remembered walking those narrow catwalks while sparks danced from welders and engineers, cursing in 3 languages as systems failed another test. She had been younger then, though her eyes were already older than her years. And she had been chosen not for her rank, but for her refusal to surrender a problem to despair. The fold sail had been theory long before it was steel, an idea laughed out of committees, too delicate, too unstable, too much like a dream to ever live. Arun Patel had been the stubborn genius who would not let the dream die. And with Kestrel as a silent partner learning in the dark, they had taught the sails to breathe and the veil to ripple. Each failure had been brutal. Reactors burnt out, frames twisted, one hull collapsed into scrap when the sail folded wrong and bent a bay in half, but every loss had been written into the next attempt. Until one night, the stars above the belt bent a fraction and stayed bent long enough for everyone on the dock to believe. The Aegis had not been built to conquer, it had been built to defend. Earth knew its colonies were small, scattered, fragile as seeds on wind, and the great empires of the galaxy cared nothing for seedbeds. They would raid, they would burn, they would enslave unless something stood between hunger and home. Reyes remembered the night the ship had been christened, the name spoken with pride that carried sorrow too, for everyone knew it might never come home. They called her Aegis because she was meant to be a shield first and always a blade only. When no other hand would save the weak, it was not romance, it was resolve. Back in the present battle, the memory gave her calm. She looked at her crew, men and women who had carried the project from docks to stars, and she knew they were stronger. For the years of work when failure had been more common than breath. The veil shimmered now, not only because Arun drove it with care, but because they had driven it with care 1,000 times before, when no one was watching. The fold sail caught distance now, not only because Kestrel whispered rhythms, but because Kestrel had whispered through every midnight test when circuits fried and lives were almost lost. This battle was not luck, it was the weight of long persistence. The Silex did not understand that history. They only saw the ship in front of them, not the years behind it. And so when their guns rearmed and their admirals argued, they missed. The heart of what they faced, to them a warship was power first, and the heart came later. To humans the heart had been the start, power only the tool that carried it. Reyes opened the line not to the flagship now, but to the drifting escorts whose crews floated alive but powerless. She spoke across open bands that could be heard by any ear. She told them a story in simple words, that Aegis was not made to destroy but to protect, that its first duty was not conquest but care, that mercy was not weakness but strength sharpened to a finer edge. She told them they were alive because of that choice, and she told them they could still choose how to live tomorrow. On the flagship, Vesk heard those words and his pride screamed at him to cut the channel, yet he did not. Because some part of him wanted to know how a captain could speak of mercy while standing under the weight of a fleet. Lyra did not miss a syllable, and she wrote them to her own memory because she felt the balance in them. She thought of her own empire's long habit of building walls of power without song or story, and she wondered if they had missed the truth that a shield without a heart is only a coffin waiting to crack. The War Council muttered about tricks, about lies, about human manipulation, but she knew her data showed more than weapons. It showed will, and will can be a force greater than mass. Reyes did not pause her ship while she spoke. She kept moving, weaving the Aegis through the narrowing jaws of the Silex net, letting her mercy be matched by her skill so that words and action were the same thing. Arun cooled the veil in careful stages, slipping heat into vents that bled into the void like slow sighs. Kestrel mapped enemy patterns and marked them not with targets, but with paths to avoid. And the crew followed each rhythm as if they were dancers on a floor of stars. For minutes that felt like years they held, teaching by survival. Cutting no more engines, but letting the silence of dead guns speak louder than another strike. When the flagship's reinforcements finally appeared on distant scopes, glittering shadows of new warships sliding from fold space, Reyes did not tremble. She told her crew that the Aegis had done what it came to do. It had shown the galaxy that humans could not only survive, but could stand. She did not know if Vesk would bend or if more battles waited, but she knew this moment was already carved into the long memory of stars. The Aegis had not just fought, it had taught, and that lesson was worth more than any single victory. Thus the fifth act of the tale closed not with an explosion, but with a steady light. A light born from backstory and belief, from docks where sparks fell like stars, from men and women who turned theory into shield, and from a captain who chose control over chaos, mercy over murder, purpose over pride. The galaxy was listening now, whether it wished to or not, and the whisper of a new kind of strength carried further than any beam of fire, and further than any threat of empire. It carried into the hearts of those who watched and wondered if perhaps the future might be shaped not by the loudest blade, but by the quietest shield that never broke. The battle shifted again as the sixth chapter unfolded, and this time it was not about the science that kept Aegis alive or the memories that carried her crew forward, but about the choice that would define whether she was only a clever machine or a true emblem of humanity itself. For all her strength and all her control, Captain Mira Reyes knew that one moment of cruelty could undo everything her ship had proven. And the Silex were about to test her with a final act of treachery that would demand more than skill. It would demand mercy sharpened into unbreakable resolve. After the spear's failure and the escort's defeat, Lord Commander Vesk found himself at a terrible crossroad. Pride had kept him upright while his fleets faltered. But pride is also a hunger, and hunger always asked for one more gamble. He summoned from the depths of the flagship a weapon so carefully hidden that only a handful of officers even knew of it. A swarm of torpedoes wrapped in stealth fields and layered with false signals, each one designed to slip between defenses and strike a hull's softest places. They were not weapons meant for an open duel. They were knives meant for a throat. In the dark, Vesk told himself this was not dishonor. This was strategy. And if he could cripple the human ship with one decisive act, the galaxy would forget the cost and remember only the victory. His crew did not all agree. Some hesitated, some whispered fear, but his command voice broke hesitation, and the swarm launched, silent as shadows, on the bridge of the Aegis Kestrel. Saw the numbers first. Faint ripples on deep scans, too many, too careful, coming from angles too clean to be chance. The AI spoke with calm urgency. Inbound objects, 87. Multiple approach vectors, stealth lattice engaged. Hostile intent confirmed. Arun Patel's hands moved in a blur across panels, and his heart hammered, because he knew the veil was not built to catch swarms from all directions at once. It was a lake against beams and bolts, but torpedoes came. Like teeth in the dark. Captain Reyes did not flinch. She told Kestrel to wake the whispers. And at once the little drones leapt into the void again. This time they did not simply copy the ship's shape. They slid between the torpedoes and began to sing false songs of heat and signal, weaving a net of lies that pulled the swarm off course. Some of the torpedoes chased ghosts and detonated far from their mark, lighting the black with brief suns that harmed nothing. But too many kept their focus. Clever warheads with layered logic that cut through the first false trail and turned again for the human ship. Reyes gave a new order, one that risked everything. She told Kestrel to open command channels in the clear, to let the torpedoes hear her as well. It sounded absurd, but the whisper drones could mimic not only signals but commands. And if they could speak the same code the torpedoes obeyed, they might bend them back. Arun's eyes widened. It was a gamble beyond gambles, but he trusted her. He fed the right power into the drones, and Kestrel shaped the words. The swarm slowed in its deadly dance, confused, torn between the voice of the flagship that had launched them and the whispers of its own kind. One by one the torpedoes began to circle, engines twisting, logic bent, until their teeth faced not outward but back toward their masters. The Silex bridge erupted in chaos as warning sirens sang of their own weapons turning home. Vesk's face darkened with a rage that nearly drowned reason. He ordered self-destruct codes, but the whispers had already stolen the authority path. The swarm folded inward. Brilliant predators now aimed at the hand that had cast them. In that moment Reyes had the power to end the flagship utterly, to let the torpedoes slam home and leave wreckage where once there had been pride. She had the power to humiliate an empire and prove that human craft was more than a match for their oldest commanders. Yet she did not take it. Instead she gave one last command through the drones, and the torpedoes blossomed into harmless detonations in the empty dark. A storm of light that scarred no hull and killed no crew. The silence that followed was heavier than any noise. Every Silex officer who had braced for death now stared at their captain with eyes that asked questions pride could not answer. Vesk clenched his fists so hard that his nails cut skin. But he could not shout this away, because all of them had felt it, the human choice to spare them. Mercy shone at the edge of triumph. Analyst Lyra bowed her head, not in shame but in recognition. She whispered for herself that the galaxy would remember this moment longer than any battle, because it was not only a victory of weapons, but a victory of will. On the Aegis bridge the crew sagged with tired relief. Arun wiped his brow with a sleeve blackened by heat and smoke from stressed panels. Kestrel dimmed its voice for a moment, as if even an AI could know exhaustion. And Captain Reyes stood tall, not because she felt tall, but because her people needed her too. She had chosen the harder path and carried it to the end. She had shown her enemies and her allies alike that power without restraint is just chaos. But power with purpose is strength. And in that silence she knew they had done more than survive. They had changed the map of what survival could mean. Asterisk word of the Aegis's impossible stand did not remain in the border system where it began. Because in a galaxy ruled by empires and stitched together by fragile treaties, every battle was also a message. Every sensor drone that had recorded the strange ripples of folded space, every stranded escort ship that still carried a living crew, every trader listening on shadowed channels, each one became a voice, and together they carried the story outward. What began as whispers turned into storms of rumor, racing across star lanes faster than any fleet could move. In the colonies close to the conflict, men and women gathered around flickering screens in mining halls and market squares. They watched shaky recon feeds of a small dark warship sliding through walls of fire as if the void itself bent to help. They heard the captured fragments of Captain Mira Reyes's voice, calm, steady, promising no war but refusing surrender. And they felt something stir in their bones that had been missing for generations. For so long they had lived under the shadow of powers that could burn their homes in an hour. For so long they had believed humans would always be outnumbered, outgunned, forced to scatter like dust in the solar winds. But now they saw a single ship standing unbroken, and they whispered a phrase with pride instead of fear. Humanity stands. The Scilex Empire could not silence the story, though Vesk tried. He sent orders to seal records, to cut transmissions, to brand the event a trick of shadows and smuggler tech. But the truth was harder than pride, for his own crews had lived it. And no iron law could stop a survivor from telling his child that he had looked at death and been spared by the mercy of a human captain. Analyst Lyra herself became a quiet vector of truth, filing reports that she knew would be intercepted by rivals, shaping her words so that the Empire's pride would sound like fear when read by foreign eyes. She did it not from betrayal, but from the sharp awareness that if the Empire learned nothing from this battle, it would break itself against. The next, in rival courts far across the galaxy, leaders read the accounts with growing unease. Some dismissed them as propaganda. Clever stories spun to lift a minor power into notice, but the details were too consistent, too precise. No one could fake the way the fold sail bent gravity in waves, or the way the veil shield turned lances into ripples. Engineers pored over the stolen recordings, tracing field distortions frame by frame, and they knew that something impossible had been made possible. Admirals stared long at the tactical reports and realized the greater danger was not the weapons, but the will, because Aegis had shown restraint where any other would have slaughtered, and restraint is the mark of a power that believes in tomorrow. Not only today, on Earth and in her colonies the news came like fire in dry grass. The Aegis had been a rumor for so long, a secret project whispered in shipyards and on back channels, but now it was real and it was victorious. Crowds cheered. In domes on Mars, miners in the belt raised cups to the unseen crew, and governors who had feared to speak too loud of independence now found their voices rising with new courage. Even the oldest veterans of the colony wars wept quietly when they saw the footage of torpedoes turning back, because they knew mercy is rarer than victory and twice as strong. Meanwhile, on the battlefield itself, the reinforcements that Vesk had summoned finally began to arrive. Black hulls sliding out of fold space in disciplined ranks. They came expecting to crush a broken foe, but instead they found their own escorts drifting powerless but alive, their own flagship scorched but unbroken, and a single human ship holding position in calm defiance. No wreckage, no corpses, only silence and a captain's voice still echoing on the open band. The new commanders hesitated because they had not tasted the fight themselves. They had only heard the echo, and the echo carried doubt. Vesk barked at them to form ranks and press the assault. But hesitation spreads like fire when pride has already been cracked, and even the proudest warrior begins to wonder what tomorrow will say if he becomes the next victim of a story already racing across the stars. So the galaxy trembled, not because of a weapon fired, but because of what was not fired. because a single warship chose to strike with precision, chose to spare lives, chose to show strength as mercy. The Scilex found themselves caught not in chains of steel, but in the eyes of the worlds watching. For everyone now knew that humans had stepped into the stage, not as beggars or victims, but as teachers. And no empire likes to be taught. And in the quiet corner of the flagship, away from the shouts of admirals and the curses of commanders, Lyra saved one last recording for herself. It was the voice of Captain Reyes saying, "We do not want you to die, and we do not need you to." And she wrote in her private log that the galaxy would measure the years to come, not by the size of empires, but by whether anyone else could learn to say the same. Asterisk. The final act of the story unfolded not in thunder or flame, but in the long silence that comes after two enemies stare across the void and realize that one more strike could set fire to 100 worlds. The Aegis held her ground, her hull still scorched from the beams, her veil shield faintly glowing as it shed the last of its heat. Her crew stood weary but unbroken, eyes red from strain yet steady with the knowledge that they had survived not only through power but through choice. Across the field, the Scilex flagship floated with systems still crackling from the failed anchor spear and the betrayed torpedo swarm. Its guns were live, its reinforcements were near, but the will to fire again had drained away into a hollow pride that no longer carried weight. Captain Mira Reyes opened the channel one last time. Her voice was quiet, but carried with it the iron of someone who had nothing left to prove. She told Lord Commander Vesk that this fight could end with honor if he chose, that the Aegis would not chase his fleet, would not shame his crews, would not carve wreckage across the stars, she asked. Only for an end to raids, for the release of prisoners, and for the first steps toward talks that might let two species stand without knives at one another's throats. Her words were not threats. They were terms, and for the first time in years, the galaxy heard a human speak to a great empire, not as a supplicant begging mercy, but as an equal demanding reason. On the Scilex flagship, silence stretched. Vesk sat rigid in his command chair, pride and fury grinding against the colder truth of defeat. He could order another strike. He could hurl his reinforcements forward. He could drown the Aegis in numbers. And perhaps he could even break her at last. But he knew what would follow. He had seen the way mercy had already spread through his crews like fire in dry grass. He had seen the hesitation in the eyes of his new admirals when they arrived and realized they were not joining a victory, but a humiliation. If he pressed on, he would not simply fight a human ship. He would fight the story that ship carried. A story too strong to silence. With a hand that trembled against the arm of his chair, Vesk gave the order no one thought he would. He told his fleet to power down their weapons. He told his reinforcements to hold back. And in that moment, he bent not to a stronger empire, but to a single warship that had shown him a truth he could not deny. The Aegis did not gloat. She did not fire a final shot to brand her triumph into history. Instead, she moved slowly through the silent line of enemy ships, her weapons cold, her hull lit only by the soft shimmer of the veil. She guided crippled escorts back toward their flagship, dragging them with tractor beams not as prizes, but as gifts returned. Her crew watched in silence as even the proudest of their foes accepted the gesture. Because pride could not rage forever against mercy shown in such plain sight. Lyra recorded every moment, and though she still served the Empire, her words carried a softness now, a recognition that this battle was not lost but transformed. She wrote in her log that the galaxy would speak of the day a human captain taught the Scilex that victory was not always measured in kills. When the Aegis finally turned for home, battered but unbeaten, the stars seemed to lean closer as if listening. Across the border worlds, cheers rose. Rival empires whispered, and even within the halls of Scilex power debates began that would not end for years. The story could not be buried, and the shadow of it fell across every council chamber and war table in the known galaxy. Some feared it, some hated it, but all of them believed it. Humanity had stepped into the great stage of history, not as prey or pawn, but as a force that could not be ignored. Yet as the Aegis slipped away into the folds of space, one last signal ghosted across her sensors. It was faint, distant, watching from the dark edge of the system. Neither Scilex nor human, its hull a silhouette unfamiliar to either side. For a breath it lingered, silent and cold, and then it was gone. Captain Reyes watched the trace fade, and knew in her bones that the galaxy was larger and darker than even this battle had shown. Today they had survived, today they had taught, but tomorrow another shadow waited, and the Aegis would have to stand again. And so the tale closed not with an end, but with a beginning. The galaxy had changed, and the stars themselves seemed to whisper a new truth into the long silence of space. Humanity stands, and nothing will ever be the same again.